It's time again for Drummer Nation Live, the show for and about drummers where we talk about all things drum and drum related. Hey, are you a good reader on the drums, on the drum set? Does it matter? Let's find out. It's time for Drummer Nation.
Introducing the Star Festival snare drum from Gary Astridge, a handcrafted and precision replica of the rarest and most iconic of drums, Ringo Starr's 1963 Ludwig Jazz Festival. Each instrument is authorized and hand-signed by Ringo Starr and will benefit his charity, the Lotus Foundation.
Our latest innovation has opened the door for all drummers to have the same access as top musicians in the world. Custom cymbals, now available to everyone. Your next sound just got more interesting. Sabian Custom Shop.
Hi, this is Stanton Moore. I've been playing and teaching drums for over 30 years. My new site, Stanton Moore Drum Academy, is the perfect online drum learning platform for any level drummer to learn how to play the drums the same way I did. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you as subscribers on the site, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
All right, welcome to Drummer Nation Live. If you haven't been here before, we do this every Wednesday at 1 o'clock, and it lives in archive on all the other places where Drummer Nation shows are posted. This is the live show. It's a less formal show than the full-blown podcast I do, which is an interview show with notable drummers. Tina Raymond is the featured guest right now on the latest podcast for Drummer Nation. Coming up, I have great LA drummer Paul Krybick, Bill Goodwin, wonderful jazz drummer, legendary jazz drummer, and how about Danny Serafin, the great drummer from Chicago and points onward. But all those are coming up. I've already done, but there are a lot more. Hey, a couple of things. First of all, something always happens just before I go on the air. I smack the hell out of my head just bumping into a wall. Stupid, but it's the kind of things that happen. So I'm lucky I didn't break my glasses or break my nose or something, but I'm working this one with a headache. Could be worse. Otherwise, I'm fine. Another thing, you saw that last spot was for a book called My Las Vegas by Bobby Morris. I'm reading it now. Bobby Morris is a drummer I wasn't aware of. He came here as a Polish immigrant with nothing and ended up sort of being Mr. Las Vegas, was music director for Elvis and all kinds of people. And if you have an affinity for drum books in the golden era of drummers working like crazy, it's hilarious, it's heartfelt, it's spot on, and I'm trying to get him to do my show. But I really am enjoying that book. You might want to check that out. Here's that spot again. Okay, he's credited with inventing that two-handed fast shuffle that was popular with Louis Prima and Just a Gigolo and all kinds of tunes that Prima did. So I heartily recommend that book. Today's topic, I heard some other people on a podcast talking about reading and the importance of it and whether or not it is important. I wanted to talk about. I have a lot of experience as a reader. I was always a good reader, so I thought I would relay some of the things in my life where it's saved my butt to read. But before that, I'd like to talk about reading in general. Is it necessary to be a great reader? The answer is no. Just depends on the kind of music you're playing, the kind of work you're doing. Does it make you a great drummer if you're a great reader? No, it sure doesn't. There are plenty of great drummers who can't read. If you're a great drummer, does it mean you're a great reader? No. There are, as I said, just the inverse. But why is it you would want to read? Well, we're going to talk about that. I came up through high school band. First of all, when I was a kid, I got a practice pad and the Goldenberg book, and just sort of taught myself how to read through eighth notes and 32nd notes and all that. It's not that difficult for single hand, two-handed reading on one drum. And then I went to high school band, and of course you read like crazy. But I went to University of North Texas, which was called North Texas State University. And back then, they were training people to be professional musicians, which included a lot of reading shows, Vegas type of shows, Broadway type of shows, big bands. They were all a lot centered around the old big band format, and they did stress big bands there. And so it was really, really emphasized that you could be a good reader. In fact, there's an old lab band album. They still record the 1 O'Clock Jazz Band, their premier ensemble. They make an album every year, I think. But there's an old album from back when Soph was in the band, the 60s, I think. And they're saying, you hear Leon Breeden, the director, saying, the sound you're hearing is the sound of music being passed out. And they're actually passing out a chart and kicking it off and sight reading it live for the album. So it seems like that might have been a little ridiculous, but in my professional experience, it was pretty close to on the mark. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that if we can. Upon getting out of college, I didn't graduate, but I moved on. And I began working at, this was the day and age in the mid-'70s, they had a lot of dinner theaters around, or small production theaters, or colleges or even high schools who would hire pros to flesh out the band. And generally speaking, the cast might rehearse for a month or longer, but the band would probably have an orchestra rehearsal, then a dress rehearsal with the cast, and then opening night, baby. Sometimes you got the music ahead of times. A lot of times you didn't. So there's a lot of reading. Now, the hard part about reading shows is it's not about, if it says jazz, rock, funk, whatever the groove is, that's fine. But there are a lot of tempo changes. There are a lot of things where you're trying to read while there are retardandos, accelerandos, fermatas, cesoras, and you've got to keep an eye on the conductor at all times. And the hard part is not beat one, mostly with conductors, unless it's a classical conductor you've never seen before. Boom, downbeat, boom. Where's beat two? So if you're going from here, 1, 2, da, 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 you're playing along there, da, da, cut off, downbeat, beat two sets the tempo. You have to be in the conductor's mind to find that beat two with him so the tempo is set. I interviewed Harvey Mason on this show, and he was the drummer that did the Academy Awards for 20-something years. And he said he never made a mistake you could hear on television, and was kind of relieved when he no longer was doing it because of that record. But, there'd be five shows up for an award, and there'd be little pieces of 5 different pieces of music. And the winner is, and the conductor would give you a downbeat. I said, where'd beat two come from? He said, me. Beat two came from him. So you really have to have a sixth sense of where the thing is going that you kind of only gain by experience. But that's not to scare you off. Let's talk about reading in general. A lot of people see notes on a staff and they realize, man, we have 4 limbs and they're all doing something differently. How can I read 4 limbs at the same time live in front of an audience or to a recording? Well, the good news is you generally don't. Sorry, I got knocked in the head. You generally don't. Those are method books usually, where the right hand is doing this and the left hand is doing that, and then we have the right foot doing this and the left foot doing that, and they're meant to be taken slowly and progressively over a long period of time. Rarely do you see a part where 4 limbs are written out, and a lot of times when you do, you just ignore it. So that's the good news. The bad news is what you do see is not what you play, but what the band plays. So you might have the band's going 2, 3, 4, 1, but, do but. Okay, let's say that. But you read that, but you play 2, 3, but, da, boom, da, rap, do but. You're filling in, improvising, setting up the band. So you're really reading what the band is playing and making up your own part. And that's enough to frighten a lot of people. But again, the thing is experience. Experience is what helps. So later on, I got out of college and was doing shows and this and that. And a chance came for me to audition for the Glenn Miller Band. I was trained to play big bands, and the Glenn Miller Band was what they called a ghost band. One of those bands where the leader died, but the band kept going. And the audition consisted of me, the conductor, the band leader wanted to make sure I could follow a conductor. So he says, I want you to sight read the music and I'm going to conduct. And I might decide to change the tempo. I might decide to make you louder or softer. You got to watch me while you're reading. And that was in other words, the audition was, he was purposely trying to screw me up and not just play time. Because a lot of times big band charts, the leader kicks it off and then gets out of the way. Sometimes it's super hairy. But that's what that was. And then when you went on one of those bands, Ghost Band, or the real bands at the time were Woody, Kenton had already, I think he was still around. But Maynard, there were some big bands still around. Of course, the Ellington Band had Duke had passed. Basie was still around at the time. But when you went on any of those bands, not so much the Basie Band, but when you went on any of those bands, there weren't rehearsals, man. You didn't go out there a week early and, you showed up and read. You read the gig that night and hopefully you had a chance to look at it before, but generally you should pretty much know the book before you get there. One other thing to point out is the difference between a practice and a rehearsal. High school bands practice. Practicing is where you're learning the parts together, learning what to play and how to play. Rehearsal, pardon me. Rehearsals are for learning to fall together as an ensemble. You don't come to rehearsal without knowing how to play your part. So reading, though, kind of combines the whole thing. You're flying by the seat of your pants. Now, you can make the argument you only really read something once, right? Sight reading. But if you're reading a 2-hour show, even though you've read it once, there's still a lot to read. So back to my experience. I did the audition with the Miller Band, and I did that band. And that band was kind of a show sort of band in that it was never really a jazz band where you just kicked it off and left it there. The leader conducted a lot, and it had to change a lot. So you go with the flow. When I moved to Los Angeles, I got hooked up with this band. Mark Masters had something called the Jazz Composers Orchestra, and it was the closest. Stan Kenton had died by that point, and that was one of my goals, was to get with Stan from knowing Peter Erskine years before and loving that band. And he had all the music from the Kenton Library. He had the music stands from the road. He had all of that, and there were a lot of alumni on the band. So I loved it because it was the closest thing I thought I would ever get to playing with the Kenton Band, and to this day it was. It was a 2-story walk-up in a bad neighborhood with this funky-ass rehearsal hall, but great players, and you'd get the music, and it would say Shelley on it, from Shelley Mann, one of my idols. And it was just very cool. But we read... Let's touch on that for a second. There used to be, to some cities, there still are, the existence of reading bands. When you were called upon to do the kind of work that required a lot of reading, those guys would look for getting together with other players to sight read big band charts and play them maybe for free, just to keep your reading up because you couldn't make those kind of mistakes in the studio. So this was a reading band, so to speak, and you'd find some great players on these reading bands. So the whole time I lived in LA, occasionally I'd do, theater gigs. I did the Ventura County Opera Association or something like that. It was a Cole Porter thing. San Francisco Mime Troupe, which wasn't mime, it was a musical. A lot of different theater events. Then there'd be some session stuff, not a lot. The big boys were doing the great dates, but you get one every now and then where there'd be some reading. And generally speaking, you're very comfortable with reading. Sometimes it's like the studio guys say, 95% boredom, 5% terror. Sometimes you get some shit that's just impossible to read. But there are guys out there who use the expression, you might have heard the expression, cat can read fly shit. Well, if you can imagine a fly flying over a piece of music and dropping, that's kind of what they mean. Hairy stuff. Generally, it's not that. So I say if you're a lot of people are intimidated about learning to read. Just jump in and learn it, man. It's a language. You read English. It's not that hard. You just have to work at it, and experience will cover the rest of it. You got to get experience somewhere. Moving through my career, I went to take a teaching gig at a university in Canada, St. Francis Xavier in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, keeping the chair warm for my buddy Terry O'Mahony while he finished his master's degree. We were pals from studying with Jeff Hamilton out in Los Angeles. And suffice it, you have to be a good reader if you're going to teach at the university level. So the reading kept me in good shape there. When I moved to Atlanta, I got involved with the Ritz-Carlton hotel chain, with flagship hotel for the whole chain was in Atlanta, and it was like a musical, like working as a court musician for in a castle or something. There was lots of music going on, and one of two things I did for them. I did a lot of things, but one of them was a big band, full-blown big band. Well, three. One was a horn band, like a top 40 cover band that had charts. 10-piece band and some singers. And another was every now and then, like 4th of July or something, it'd be an orchestral gig with drum set. So there was a lot of reading that went on there. And I was finding it. It didn't bother me. I remember the first gig I did with that big band, we were at a mall or something. And I'm sight reading. I never played with them before. The music is over there, I should say. And there are dancers. There's a big drum solo where I have to cue back in dancers before the band comes in from the conductor. There was a CNN camera walking around. So I'm trying to watch the conductor, make sure I'm straight with the dancers, read the part, and not get bugged by a camera in my face. You see what happens? If you're a good reader, at least you don't have to worry about that. All right, so maybe I'll make a mistake, I'll cover it, but generally speaking, I'm not worried about that part of it. Just by being a good reader, that can save your ass. Okay? Another time I was asked to sub at the Atlanta Lyric Opera, whatever it is, at the First Theater in Georgia Tech campus. A friend of mine was playing the gig, and he said, "Hey, man, I need your help. I can't make the dress rehearsal and opening night. I'm not sure I can make it on time. But I can be there probably by, right after downbeat. You might want to, can you just learn the overture and sub for me?" And I'm like, well, if you know what the overture is, it's the part they play before the show that includes excerpts from the entire show. And West Side Story is tough. It's not an easy show. There's a lot of crazy time signatures, and the overture has all of it in it. So I said, okay, man, all right. So I look through he sends me the music, and I look at the overture, and it's tough, but I think I got it. And I show up, dress rehearsal. I'm in the pit, and my friends, what are you doing here, man? What happened to Butch Severs, good drummer in Atlanta? I said, well, he'll be here soon, I hope. And sure enough, before the thing started, he shows up. Off the hook, don't have to read, don't have to do anything that night. I sat there and watched the show. Next night, opening night. We're all in the pit. Whoops, sorry to bump the mic. The lights come down. Conductor comes on, the light comes on him. He turns to the orchestra, and we're about to start playing the overture for West Side Story. I haven't played a single note with these people, and in walks Butch. Butch takes a stick, sits down, and makes the opening. So being a good reader is the only thing that allowed me to say, okay, I can do this. But that's kind of how it goes. Sometimes it's trial by fire, and reading will save your ass. I'll tell you another anecdote. There was the Alliance Theater, which is one of the premier theaters in the Southeast, was producing a show called Jelly's Last Jam about Jelly Roll Morton with a small big band that was on stage, actually. And there was a drummer in town doing it, very good drummer, but he wasn't getting along with the music director. Got rid of him very suddenly, called my buddy Scott von Ravensburg. Well, Scott was in town, and he went and did the gig, and they loved him. He did a great job. And they said, okay, we need you to do the whole show. Well, he happened to be home on a break from a riverboat. He had a riverboat gig that was all year long. And they would be on and off for periods of time. And as soon as they give him the gig, he gets the call to go back to the boat. Well, he's got good bread, steady employment, health insurance. He's got to go. So now they're on their third drummer. And they called me up, and the music director says, well, I got an hour. We can rehearse at the theater tomorrow afternoon before we open. Okay, so in this case, I didn't have the music. I got together with the conductor, him and I played piano for an hour. The hell, the show's longer than an hour. And that's what we had, man. That was the rehearsal, and I had to read through the whole thing and play the gig. Got through it. Didn't bother me. It was all right because I knew I could read. I worked, I'll get to the end of this. I worked for a whole bunch of things. Atlanta Pops, Orchestra, no rehearsal for that. Just show up and read the thing. Larry Elgart was a big band leader in Florida, came up and did some gigs up around here in Atlanta, hired me for that. No rehearsal. You just have to read. Okay, now you can argue that there are great drummers who don't read at all, and you're right. I don't think Tommy Lee's ever been asked to read anything. I don't think Ringo Starr or Charlie Watts or all kinds of my favorite drummers out there can read. That's okay. It's only something you need if you're working in the genres that require it. And you might argue that those are less and less these days. But if you want to do that, if you want to be able to do that kind of work, session work, if there is such a thing anymore, theaters, shows, big bands, all kinds of things where you would be required to read, it's going to help you make a lot of money, a lot more money. None of us make a lot of money being able to read. So you need to figure out if that's something you feel should be in your arsenal. And if it is, get on it, man. It's not that hard. If it's not, work on something else. There's plenty of other things to work on. So that's my take on reading. Let's hear from a few other of my sponsors. Did I mention I hit my head? All right, here we go.
These Regal Tip session sticks feel great. They kind of put me in the mindset of a thinner and lighter 5A. Go to regaltip.com, order a pair, or go to your nearest music store. Pick up a pair and let us know exactly how you feel about the stick.
Hello everyone, my name is David Victor. I'm General Manager with the Craviato Drum Company. We wanted to offer a one-ply, solid shell product, but we wanted it to stay true to our mission of offering handmade drums of uncompromised quality built here in the USA. So take a listen to our Center Stage Series drum set.
Drummers seeking a quick and easy way to muffle bass drums on the fly, look no further. Muffbone offers an effective way to instantly dial in your sound in just a few seconds while seated at the kick. Find out more at muffbone.com. Memphis Drum Shop is the world's premier provider of percussion instruments. With 6 showrooms of gear, mycymbal.com, the Memphis Gong Chamber, and a first-rate repair department, turn to Memphis Drum Shop for all your percussion needs. Love that, Chad Smith. By the way, I just saw an interview Chad did with Ginger Baker. I've done a lot of interviews. Ginger's not an easy interview. And Chad did his best on that. But the reason I'm bringing it up is the word is that Ginger's in a bad way. He's in very poor health. And let's just send our thoughts out for him. Ginger Baker, man, he was a piece of work for sure. He is a piece of work, but he was also a great drummer. He is also a great drummer. I'm talking about him like he's no longer with us. He is, but he's not doing well. So we send our thoughts to Ginger Baker. Okay, I usually do a few calls to action. Here you go. Show topics. You want to let me know some? Let me know. You can comment right now. Most people watch this in post, so I don't get any comments. Please sign up for our drummer newsletter at drummernation.com, where you will see a form that looks like that, and it will give you an access to download a paper on social media for artists. Look us up on Patreon. Some people contribute a little bit, really helps a lot. Okay, those are my calls to action. Watch for the podcast show wherever podcasts are found. The live show is here on Facebook and our affiliate Facebook pages. A lot of other people allow us to cross post this. Then it's later posted on YouTube, so you can see all the live shows as well. Ringo's Beatle Kit, special shout out to Gary Astridge, my buddy. By the way, Ringo, not a reader. Oh, we talked about that. Did I mention I hit my head? Okay, here's the scroll of some of the sponsors, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks a lot. Take care.